somebody who's really stepped up into a role. We've talked true freshmen. Let's continue to talk true freshmen coming up next on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Another true freshman that's really standing out for the Oklahoma Sooners, and that was Jacob Jordan, who got his first action on offense against South Carolina, came through with 6 catches for over 80 yards, and the dude just showed up and showed out. He got into a series, and they threw it to him 3 straight times. It's like, here you go, Jacob Jordan, time to baptize you with some college football action. And they let him speak to the media after practice on Tuesday night, which is also another really strong sign for what he's done in the practice film or on the practice field, in the film room. And I think he's going to earn more opportunities this coming weekend.
Yeah, he's going to be one of those players to keep your eyes out for. When they asked him about, the comparisons to Drake Stoops in the interviews today and after practice, and he said, that's someone that he's always looked up to, and that's who he emulates his game to. And to be honest, if he can go out there and be another Drake Stoops, that's nothing but a great thing for Sooner Nation. Drake was always nails when it come to just finding a way to get to a little pocket, get open, and just make the catch. You want guys that can do that, guys that are pretty slippery and deceptively fast or deceptively agile, can get into those little areas that teams aren't even paying attention to them. He showed us that against South Carolina, and I think that he can provide that for the rest of the season. I also think that going forward, you're going to see a different type of rotation of wide receivers. Now that we've got a different regime running the actual offense, I expect to see some of the bigger guys more often, and then I see certain sets where you're bringing the young guys, the faster, smaller guys to be able to do like burner routes or whatnot. But I could totally see Jacob being that next Drake Stoops where he's just finding ways to get open, and he's used as kind of a quote-unquote safety net in some plays where you need 3rd and 2, you get him at that 3-yard line and teams are watching for the deeper pass or the bigger guys. He's one that can slip in there and make something happen.
He showed that the moment wasn't too big.
Right.
To come into a game, your first opportunity to get playing time at the collegiate level, and you produce. That's what this offense has needed. They needed somebody to step up when they get an opportunity. How many guys have they put out there on the field at wide receiver, and it's just been okay, one good play here and then 2 steps back? Or, you have a series where you're dropping balls or you're fighting with the ball every time it comes to you, or you're not in the right spot, or you're not getting open. And here's a guy, again, got an opportunity and took advantage of it. That's what we've been begging for all season long, whether it's JJ Hester or Zion Reagans or Zion Kearney, any of these younger guys or less experienced guys. We've just been begging for somebody to take advantage of the opportunity. And it is awesome to see Jacob Jordan do that. And whether he's the next Drake Stoops or not, maybe he's the first Jacob Jordan. And by the end of his tenure, we're speaking of him in a similar light as Drake Stoops. I mean, I don't know if anybody will ever compare to Drake Stoops because of the family lineage, but if he goes out there and he continues to ball and he continues to play like this, you're going to have a hard time convincing people he's not a little Drake Stoops starter kit, because, I mean, everything he was doing looked a lot like Drake Stoops, just making tough catches, getting hit after making the catch, holding onto the ball when he did it, running good routes, getting open. I mean, it was all there for him. And this is the kind of guy that every successful college football team has.
Yes,
it's the guy that just defies the traits, right? It's, you might not run the fastest 40, you might not be the biggest, you might not be the most physical, you might not be able to jump out the gym, but you just play good football. And that's what this team needs. Yeah, and you work hard. That's what this team needs. They need guys that work their tail off, and they just are good football players. Nobody's ever going to convince me that Tim Tebow was a quote-unquote good quarterback. The dude was a terrible thrower, but he was a good football player, a great football player, one of the greatest football players to ever play college football. But he was a terrible thrower of the ball. But he made it work. And that's what Jacob Jordan has an opportunity to do, especially if they continue to get him on the field, is just making it work and being another walk-on success story at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, and right now, so I want to see more Jacob Jordan. I want to see more Zion Kearney. He was probably one of the better blocking wide receivers that we had, especially on the run. He's a big physical kid, and he was doing a really good job of actually blocking. So when we run the ball, if you ran the ball to Zion Kearney's side, he actually was getting into those corners' bodies and being able to create some space to where the running back had a place to run. So if you're running outside zones, I want to see more Zion Kearney on the field. And then I want to see you get him the ball in some passes. I mean, not perfect. He's still young. He's still learning, but he was one of the players I was like, okay, if you get this 6'1", 200-pound wide receiver out there, he's going to be tough for corners and safeties to be able to just knock around. He's built to be an SEC wide receiver. And in that Texas game, you start to see, okay, he's ready to play. He didn't back down. Yep. He had 42 snaps in that game. He graded at 69, 78 on the run block. I want more of that. And I think if you keep him out there for even more, you'll get a lot of that going forward.
Yeah, I think it's time to get him some experience. Listen, JJ Hester has done some really good things, but I want to see more Zion Kearney as well. If there's a guy on this team right now that has that wide receiver one potential, a guy that's able to do everything you need him to do in the offense, it's Zion Kearney. He can win in the short, the intermediate, and the deep game. He can run the reverse game. He can run the wide receiver screen game because he's elusive after the catch and he's physical.
Yeah,
get him the ball, get him on the field, get him the ball, and just start to develop these guys. I know we talked about all the guys that are going to be coming back next year, but given the injury situations, you've got to develop your true freshmen to be ready to compete for roles next year. And especially if Jayden Gibson's not ready for the start of the season, if you're still dealing with stuff with Nick Anderson, Jalil Farouk, I mean, he's going to come back healthy this year, but when you start having feet problems at wide receiver, it becomes not just a one-off problem. A lot of times it can be a lingering issue that you deal with over multiple seasons. Go back to watch the Dez Bryant, like the end of Dez Bryant's career with the Dallas Cowboys. Once he broke his foot, the dude was never the same again. And I'm not saying that this is going to be the case for Jalil Farouk, but you've got to have other options in case that is an issue. And so now is the time. You got 5 games to give Ivan Carrion and Zion Kearney and Zion Raggins and KJ Daniels and Brennan Thompson and Jacob Jordan. Get all these guys as many snaps as possible, for better or for worse, and figure out what you got.
Yeah, because at this point, red shirts are kind of basically out the window. You probably, if Farouk is able to come back, you wait and bring him back more so either Maine or Alabama. That way he can preserve his red shirt and come back next year if you want to bring him back for leadership purposes. A lot of the younger players, they've already hit that point. They're not going to get that red shirt. Put them out there on the field. You maybe be able to red shirt them next year. That they continue to train, but you'll have them available with experience if you do lose somebody. Even from there, when you look at the offensive line, and I kind of mention this to a couple people, if Andrew Anthony does come back, it's probably closer to Maine, because then he can redshirt and come back as well. That gives him an opportunity to come back, because that'll be game number 2 of the season for him since he played in the first game. Then he'll be able to do Alabama, LSU, and then he'll be at his 4 max, and he can go ahead and redshirt and come back since he's technically a senior without a redshirt. You do that, then you'll start seeing some of the younger players. The main game is when I expect to see majority of the young guys get out there on the field, especially on the offensive line, because that's the game that keeps them from burning their red shirt if you want them to keep a red shirt for the year. You play them Maine, Alabama, LSU. They build up that experience. I mean, Alabama may not be a game you want them to play in and try to gain experience, but it may be an opportunity to toss them out there and see who's out there ready to be a man, because Bama's going to come down your throat. Same thing with LSU. They're going to come at you. They're going to try to punch you in your mouth, and that's a good chance for you to see if these guys are truly, I guess you could say, SEC ready.
Yeah, or at least that you have some guys that you can start to build your offensive line around for the future.
100%.
And listen, those will not be easy matchups. I don't care what you see out of Alabama or what you've seen out of LSU, although LSU's won 6 in a row, and they're looking like a team that can win the SEC this year. And the way that the way they got after Jackson Dart in that last game, I started having some nightmares about Oklahoma's offensive line situation. That could be a rough one.
Yeah.
But that's a problem for future Jay and John to discuss the final week of the regular season. And we'll get to Oklahoma LSU ahead of their trip to Baton Rouge down the road. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Also hit the subscribe button and notification bell over there on YouTube to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sooners, also available on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. But until next time, he's Jay, I'm John. Boomer.
Sooner.